Good afternoon and welcome to the 2021 Cornell Energy Connection. I'm Brian Martin, a second-year MBA student in the two-year full-time program at Johnson and the president of the Cornell Energy Club. For 12 years now, the Cornell Energy Connection has been the university's premier annual energy event. Each year, this event consists of panel discussions featuring industry leaders who share their unique perspectives on key issues impacting their portion of the energy sector. For this year's event, students were polled on a variety of discussion topics to ensure that the subjects discussed at CEC reflect areas within the energy sector that students are most interested in learning more about. This year, those subjects are the future of natural gas, the future of hydrogen, and the future of the grid based on the current trajectory of the overall energy landscape. Thank you to the CEC student organizers for their hard work in putting these three discussion topics together: Alvaro Pinto, Nikita Manral, and Ina Jerka. Thank you to Cornell for seamlessly guiding us onto this virtual platform for the second year in a row. And thank you to the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise at Cornell Johnson, specifically Faculty Director Mark Milstein, Associate Director Monica Twinard, and Center Coordinator Sophia Abdul Hamid for providing a platform where students can explore subject matter that is interesting to them, a platform that supports an open dialogue and serves as a conduit between academia and the public and private sectors. Lastly, we want to thank our sponsors, Con Edison, Chevron, and Distributed Sun. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that the Ithaca campus of Cornell University is located on the traditional homelands of the Gayokono, the Cayuga Nation. The Gayokono are members of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. The Confederacy precedes the establishment of Cornell University, New York State, and the United States of America. We acknowledge the painful history of Gayokono dispossession and honor the ongoing connection of Gayokono people, past and present, to these lands and these waters. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our moderator for today's discussion, a current executive MBA student with years of experience in the midstream energy sector for IE Nova, hailing from Mexico City and a board member of the Cornell Energy Club, my friend, Alvaro Pinto. What's up, Alvaro?
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for the introduction and welcome all of you to this interesting panel for an initial panel for CEC 2021. So our topic for today, like Brian said, is the future of natural gas and its role in the energy sector. And before I introduce our panelists, I would like to give a brief opening remark in regards to the industry, current situations, and where this is going. I would like to start by saying that successions of market events over the last few years illustrate the critical role flexibility plays to ensure security and continuity of supply. Flexibility, in our case, also applies to the energy industry, and delivering it while securing supply will require prudent and scalable approaches within a sector where an indispensable transition towards a low-carbon industry is imminent. As everyone here is probably aware of, the UN Climate Conference COP26 is just wrapping up in Glasgow, Scotland, with many countries pledging to no longer build coal plants and many planning to be carbon-free by 2050 or even sooner than that. As the transition conversation progresses, the world needs an energy transformation of unprecedented scales that involve a wide range of clean fuels and low carbon technologies. With this in mind, we want to better understand the role of natural gas may or may not play in countries' decarbonization efforts, which is our core topic for today's panel. With that, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome and introduce 3 exceptional panelists for this afternoon. I would like to start with Arely Covarrubias. Arely is a commercial director for natural gas at Sempra Infraestructura. Arely has more than 14 years of experience in the energy sector and is responsible for the administration and commercial operations of Sempra infrastructura natural gas assets, as well as for the associated optimization efforts. Before this appointment, she had been the business and commercial manager and also has been part of the regulatory external affairs at Sempra Infraestructura. In her previous experience before entering Sempra, she was a legislative advisor and account executive in energy matters at Guerra Castellanos and Asociados. Arely has a degree in international relations for ITAM in Mexico City and is currently the president of Transport Committee at the Mexican Natural Gas Association. Arely, we're so happy to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Our second panelist is Lance Christ. Lance has more than 30 years of experience in financial services across a range of project finance, private equity, and mezzanine investing, including 18 years in the global energy business. Lance is the global head of equity for infrastructure at the International Finance Corporation, IFC, which is a private sector arm of the World Bank Group. In his role, he leads IFC strategy and execution for equity and mezzanine investing across the energy, transport, water, telecommunications, and mining sectors. Lance chairs the IFC Investment Committee, responsible for execution and asset management of its $3 billion equity and mezzanine business in these sectors, which include over 100 investees in more than 30 countries, ranging from early stage startups to private equity backed platforms and listed companies. In addition to working directly with management teams and shareholder partners, Lance has oversight for selection of IFC's nominees director on investee boards and negotiation of investment exits. Lance holds a master's in business administration from the Wharton School and a Bachelor of Arts in government from Cornell University. He also completed the executive development program at Harvard Business School and board governance programs at IMD and the UK Institute of Directors. Lance, glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar.
Finally, Ricardo Hernandez. Ricardo is an energy professional with 20 years of experience trading clean fuels and LNG at a global scale. Ricardo has held various roles in energy activities such as gasoline blending, physical and financial hedging, cargo arbitrage, business origination, and book leader. Ricardo started his career working for Mexico's national oil company, Pemex, in the international division PMI, and later joined Coastal Corporation Refining in Houston. In the year 2000, Ricardo went on to become the vice president for clean products at a Noble Group in Connecticut, and later managed the U.S. distillate book for Itachu Petroleum Company in San Francisco and London. In the last 12 years, Ricardo has held various positions at Chevron Corporation, focusing on business development in Latin America. Ricardo is currently the head of business development for Gunvor USA, and he is a graduate from the UTAM in Mexico City with major in economics. Ricardo, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, I would like to now get us started with the discussion. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to touch four key factors of the topic for natural gas and its role in energy transition. But I would like to start with an initial overview of natural gas industry to conceptualize the topic to our audience. So Arely, I would like to start with you for this topic, and then Lance and Ricardo, if you want to jump in after to complement the questions, please. So Arely, help us understand the role of natural gas in the global, regional, or even local energy mix. Why is natural gas at the heart of the global energy discussion?
Thank you, Alvaro. Well, this question is very, very interesting because we may be tempted to think that with all this urgency to move forward on the implementation of measures, behaviors, and sources of energy that will lead the way to a cleaner present and future. Natural gas as a non-renewable energy should be displaced from the energy matrix as soon as possible. The issue is that although natural gas is not renewable, it is a clean energy source that can help the world to transit to 100% renewable energy matrix, particularly in the case of developing countries. And why? Well, because several things. First, due to its intrinsic characteristic as a very efficient source of energy. As an example, we can say that combined cycle plants can generate electricity with around 35% less fuel than other types of power generation facilities. And third, because natural gas is a booster for economic development. If you look at a map where there is natural gas infrastructure, you will see that economic indicators will reflect lower levels of poverty. So from my point of view, the reason why natural gas is at the heart of the global energy discussion is because it can guide the path for the energy transition. And that is also why we see that it is considered as one of the sources of energy that will continue to be widely used by 2050.
Thank you. Those are interesting points. Lance, I would like to tap on your expertise in this case and to get us going with the current overview. Why is natural gas at the heart of the global conversation?
Thanks, Alvaro. And by the way, thanks for the invite here. I'm very sorry we can't be all gathered together in Ithaca. I hate to date myself, but this is my 30th anniversary or reunion year, so I'm looking forward to getting to Ithaca in the springtime, though it's lovely in the fall. Look, I think right now the reality of natural gas is at the very tense intersection of two major developments. And on the one hand, as I already said, there's the critical global need for energy. Yet on the other hand, as you said in your intro, we're sitting now alongside the ongoing COP26 UN climate discussion, trying to assess what sorts of measures can be taken to address the issues of climate change. These are multi-decade challenges. They're multi-generational challenges. But I think the context is critical. We expect that electricity demand will increase by about 50% between now and 2040. That's being driven by a number of factors: general global growth, increased digitalization, increased electrification as we look to the transition to electrification of the transport system with e-mobility, electric vehicles. So there's going to be a massive increase in the demand for electricity. At the same time, we do not yet have the tools at our disposal in terms of the technology to get there with renewables. So it's critical for us to meet those needs with some form of energy. And as I already said, natural gas today is really the best solution for, on the one hand, addressing in a cost-effective means the electricity demands, but on the other hand, doing so in a way that is much more responsible towards climate than as we see in coal or oil or diesel. So I know we'll talk more about some of the technological aspects. There are almost 1 billion people today who don't have access to electricity. Of course, we take it for granted here in the US and Europe, but if you look in Africa and South Asia, more than 850 million people today do not have access to affordable, reliable, sustainable energy. So addressing that energy challenge is a critical one. And so far, baseload 24/7 renewables is not a reality.
Thank you. Completely agree with what you said. Ricardo, I would like to ask you the same question, but I want to add a key thing that Lance just talked about in terms of accessibility. We've seen accessibility being in the conversation as well now during COVID and due to other weather events that have been happening in the last couple of years. In addition to the reason behind natural gas being at the heart of the conversation, what do you make of the natural gas industry almost 2 years into the COVID pandemic? And what would be your point of view of the industry's path going forward?
Thank you a lot and thank you, Cornell, for the invitation. Very, very happy to talk about this subject. I think it's very important. Just briefly, I basically wanted to let you know, or basically tell you that I believe natural gas is a transitional fuel because at the end of the day, it does meet a couple of the needed basically what the world needs in terms of energy, in terms of affordability, and in terms of improvement on air quality. But let us remind us that natural gas has been used for a long time, not only to power transport or electricity, but also to power houses. So in terms of its usage, it does allow, like Arely says, the development of the economies and persons worldwide. So for me, I believe that natural gas not only has significantly changed, and I mean trade and market, in the last 10 years, it has basically become a possible transitional fuel because it can now not only be moved by pipelines, but it can actually be moved by ships. You basically, and I'm specifically talking about LNG. The fact that you can now ship LNG and turn it into natural gas allows a linkage to the whole world. And this allows basically and this is why natural gas is basically can basically be found to be a transitional fuel. What has happened with COVID and what have we seen in the last 2 years? Being natural gas and LNG both commodities, we have seen that their use has been it hasn't really been decreased. It's shown to be resilient, it's shown to be needed, and it's shown to be affordable in its use. So I believe that going forward, what we will see is that more people, more countries, more governments will rely on natural gas for its use, basically.
Perfect, thank you. And I like that you touched the topic of transitional fuel, which leads us to one of the core topics of this panel, which is the energy transition. For that, I want to give just a brief remark that there is an increasing interest with regards to the overall energy transition, like all you panelists just mentioned, mainly envisioning a net zero industry. However, we've also seen a lot of skepticism, mostly on the economic side. The question I want to pose at this point, can major oil and gas companies really move away from hydrocarbons, especially from natural gas, considering it may be one of the most efficient energy resources, just like Arely said? Ricardo, I would like to start with you on this one. Can major oil and gas companies really move away from hydrocarbons?
Okay, so actually, there's a discussion right now with regards of oil companies and natural gas companies in terms of leading a change into the future and moving away from the usual sources of energy and the movement of oil and gas and others. I believe that there is a lot of ways that the oil companies can actually transition or move away from actually move towards a better future in terms of environmental friendly fuels. Some of these solutions are already happening. No, basically, oil companies decided that moving away from oil and into natural gas was the right step in the right directions towards the environment and emissions. No, the future, and by this what I mean is that we move from solid to liquids to natural gas or to gases. This is the way to go in terms of companies. The fact is also, the reality also is that oil companies and other companies are not alone in this. They are not alone in the world taking their own decisions. Basically, they go by the rules and they work in different countries, and they basically serve a purpose, which is basically to supply the needed energy that the world needs. So I believe that the companies can push along and can help supply things that are cleaner, but at the end of the day, it's between the supply and demand that could actually help the companies, oil companies specifically, provide the necessary fuels that the world demands. No? So basically, I believe it is possible, it is being done, and basically.
Thank you. Lance, I would like to move on with you in relation to that. In addition to that question that I just posed, in terms of if major oil gas companies can move away from hydrocarbons, but I would like to add another variable to that question, in the sense of how can natural gas be consistent with a net zero future by 2050? And this, as you mentioned, with the COP26, more than 80 countries have signed the Global Methane Pledge, which is a collective commitment to cut methane emissions 30% by 2030. How can major oil and gas move away from hydrocarbons, and how can still in the near future natural gas be consistent with those pledges?
No, thanks, Alvaro. And I think those are clearly related, but in a way they're also two different questions. How can they position themselves better to be positive actors in the climate transition on the one hand, and then can they move away from hydrocarbons? Clearly, oil and gas companies have long institutional knowledge about working in energy markets, highly regulated markets, dealing with governments and the like. So they've got a lot of skill set. They're used to going into challenging environments. And so I think there's some positives there. However, at the end of the day, they're also typically geared towards very capital-intensive, engineering-intensive projects. That's not really the profile of, say, the solar PV business. It's a bit more like what we're starting to see more and more in the wind space. So the kinds of capital expenditures we're looking at, the kinds of engineering challenges we're seeing in things like deep offshore wind are akin to what deep offshore drilling and oil and gas exploration is like. So I think they could be well positioned to transition into that space, which, as we've seen by President Biden's proposals to open up large portions of the U.S. Coast to offshore wind, I mean, could position large oil and gas companies well in that area. There are other areas I think they can actually respond to still within their core businesses, which will be quite important. So you mentioned methane. Clearly, greater discipline around eliminating methane from the existing gas transportation distribution infrastructure is a critical piece of that. And then likewise, as we think ahead and coming to your question about the sort of net zero future, I think having carbon capture and storage successfully developed and deployed will be a critical piece of that. I don't see any way that gas does not continue to play a fundamental role within the energy matrix going out to 2050, based on what we're seeing today in terms of technological developments in renewables, but doing so in a way where it's able to, again, do it through a low carbon or no carbon solution is something I think the oil and gas companies are capable of. But these are clearly existential challenges they have to deal with.
Those are great points, and I completely agree with that. But before moving into, before complementing what you said, Lance, I would like to really, participate on the on this question. And how can natural gas companies move away from hydrocarbons? Is it possible?
Well, just to complement a little bit what Ricardo and us already explained, I think that leave behind natural gas in the medium and in long term, at least 30 years from now, will not be entirely possible due to the characteristics that we have mentioned today. But this does not mean that companies like, for example, the one that I represent, cannot, as you say, move forward from hydrocarbons. We need, and we are actually working in understanding how new cleaner and renewable technologies, like, for example, hydrogen, can be implemented in Mexico, in our country. No, so the answer to your question is yes. Companies can really move away from hydrocarbons. Maybe not exactly by 2050, particularly again in the case of countries like Mexico that may need to have a little more time with a strong presence of natural gas in its energy mix to first reach a better development level while mitigating greenhouse emissions by using a low cost and efficient clean energy source.
Great. Thank you. And before I move on, because those topics are very relevant, I believe the audience really wants to get into those topics and hear from you, experts in this matter. The next portion of the next topic I wanted to discuss is basically a complementary question on what you just mentioned in terms of how does that transition look like in terms of the energy mix, and how can that be achieved? And just a quick parenthesis here, we have a Q&A section for the audience after the panel, but we have received a question that I think really is really interesting, that we kind of comment on this, and I'm not going to focus it on the U.S., but I'm going to focus it on whatever market we have experience in. And Lance, with the stated prospect, a member of the audience is asking, with the stated prospect that electricity demand will increase 50% by 2040, which you mentioned, can you elaborate more on what percentage of impact is the U.S. based on these assumptions? And for Ricardo Areli, if we want to jump into that in terms of the Mexican sector or the LATAM in general, please go ahead. So Lance, can we start with you?
Sure. So sort of broadly speaking, actually what we've seen for a number of years now is energy demand in the OECD markets, so in the US and Western Europe, actually decreasing or flat. And that's because what we've seen is continuous improvements in energy efficiency, whereby economic growth is essentially offset, which ordinarily would mean increased energy demand, is offset by energy efficiency. So the demand in the U.S. and rest of the OECD, again, Europe, developed Asia, et cetera, has been relatively flat. Where we've really seen the big gains in demand coming from have been in the developing world. So again, Latin America, Africa, developing Asia, and within that, particularly from developing Asia. So clearly India and China being the two largest demand centers, but others as well. So we would really expect to see the bulk of that 50% coming from these countries where we have both expectations for higher growth, thus higher energy demand, and less advancement as far as the energy efficiency goes. These, of course, are also the places where we're seeing the greatest challenges when it comes to continued increase in coal generation capacity. And so these are the areas where I think we're really seeing the greatest tension of this sort of energy demand versus climate really come into the fore.
Thank you, Lance. I don't know if Ricardo or Areli want to jump into this one.
I don't know, Ricardo, you want to start?
No, please, Areli.
Okay. Okay, well, yeah, if we talk around the electricity needs in Mexico and what happened with the pandemic, as Ricardo was mentioning before, although natural gas reduction in the demand, although natural gas had a reduction on its demand during this pandemic era, this reduction was not as relevant as the case of other fossil fuels, and was accompanied by a fall in prices, which worked as an incentive for not decreasing its use, particularly in the case of electricity generation. So I think that the demand in the case of Mexico will continue its and around the world will continue its recovery as we have seen in the recent months. Of course, we have been seeing a little hit on the prices. The prices have been increasing a little bit and will continue to increase because we are approaching to the winter season and we definitely don't know how the weather will treat us. But after this winter season, the prices, I think that they will come back to a more kind of normal price that we have seen. So in the case of Mexico, the use of natural gas as a source of power generation, but also as a source for another industrial and many industrial processes, will continue to increase at the same growth rate that we have seen in the last 5 years. So in Mexico, natural gas for generation will continue to be used a lot.
Thank you, Areli. Some final thoughts?
Yes, so Alvaro, I think one of the things that the audience has to acknowledge is that, and like Lance and Areli said, depending on, basically, when we talk about natural gas being a transitional fuel or basically becoming a transitional energy source, we cannot forget that natural gas has been used for the last 40 years. So basically, any transition takes a long time. It's just a lot of generations that will go through this transition, and we're starting to see the next transition into the next fuel. So in terms of electricity, or in terms of natural gas being used for electricity purposes, it basically is, what you need to see is country by country, what is the mix of how the electricity is generated in terms of the use of coal, in terms of the use of fuel oil, diesel, and natural gas. So I think that what we're seeing right now, and is that natural gas is here to stay for a long time, if not decades, because it's going to require to be part of every single country as a source of electricity generation. Before something else comes along, it's commoditized, is able to be transported, in a safe, reliable, and an efficient way, and also be affordable. So at the end of the day, even like Lance says, if electricity is expected to grow 50% in terms of demand, natural gas most likely be part of that mix. Yes, specifically the US, you'll see it because there is a lot of electricity being produced from natural gas, less and less from coal, and really not much of diesel. So it depends on every country.
Thank you all for your answers. Now I want to transition into an important topic here, and we've all mentioned key factors here and how we would look like, and it is all good and fine, but how are we going to pay for that? How is that going to be financed? And I think that has to be a part of the core conversation for this topic and in general. So I want to move into the financing part and just remarking the fact that as we immerse ourselves in financing the energy transition, Lance, what are some factors that should be considered to facilitate capital investment for future growth in financing natural gas projects? Also, how can we bring private sector finances to the table in order to develop new generation sustainable infrastructure to help reverse climate change?
Well, thanks, Alvaro. So I think here I need to just be clear in focusing on my remit, which is as part of IFC, part of the World Bank Group. Our mission is to promote development in the developing world and emerging markets, and so that's very much where we focused our attention. In that space, and apropos of some of the things we've been talking about here, we have had now for about a decade a strategy whereby the core focus of our energy investments has been on promoting the development of renewables in our member countries. And I think that's borne out by our numbers. About 3/4 of the investment we've made has been in developing solar, wind, and hydro across the world, about 15 gigawatts over the last 10 years. That being said, as we've talked about here now, we see gas as still playing a critical role in that mix as a transition. And the good news is we think that the business models and the availability of finance for gas has actually been improving during that time frame. Historically, gas development was very much limited to where you had a center of demand that could be accessed by a pipeline and an upstream development. And we certainly have that in the U.S., and we've got that in a number of other countries as well. But it's been far more challenging to get gas into more remote locations and markets. The big development that has really rocked markets over the last decade has been the transition of LNG, liquefied natural gas, from what was historically a very limited trade from a few number of countries, Australia, Qatar, and others, to Japan and Tokyo, who were the AAA long-term buyers, to now what we're seeing is a very vibrant market because of availability in places like the U.S., where we're now exporting LNG, and upcoming supplies in Africa and elsewhere, and also the ability to do it on a smaller scale through floating storage and other kinds of units. So now emerging markets can access these same forms of gas energy that they couldn't before. So I think that's an exciting development from the perspective of countries that historically have not had access to gas. It also makes for a more complex set of financing challenges. If you were a project finance banker, you want to have a supply, you want a long-term AAA rated offtake that you as a lender can lend to. These are much more complicated sorts of structures, but they're ones where I think global investors who are looking for yield in their investments are becoming much more open to taking the kinds of risks inherent in financing energy infrastructure in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia. And so mobilizing private capital, literally trillions of dollars of private capital that is available, is possible. Now, having said all of that, clearly, again, we have a climate challenge facing us, and that is, as positive as climate is to supporting the greater penetration of renewables, be it serving as a backstop to hydro in Brazil, or be it addressing the issues of intermittency in solar in many of the African countries, it still is a fossil fuel. And we're seeing increasingly financial institutions adopting policies, my own included, that are very averse to long-term investments in fossil fuels. So I think the good news is technologies, business models are adapting in ways that can make it more accessible. There is a lot of finance available, but the politics around it is not going to get any easier. It's going to get more challenging over those coming years. And so we're seeing that tension between the technical commercial on the one hand and the policy addressing with the long-term climate.
That is great. And you talked about, the private and the public point of view of this, as well as the financing. And you mentioned at the beginning that the IFC is promoting renewables, the development of renewables as part of the transition. However, natural gas is definitely part of that mix, or should be part of that mix in the short term. And so, based on that, I would like to ask Ricardo and Nareli, with what Lance just mentioned, which is critical. What do the new viable types of natural gas infrastructure projects that will help make that transition, that will make that transition a reality? How would those new projects look like in the near term? Is this different for developing countries versus developed economies? What exciting new innovations are on the horizon that you think will help propel the industry to that cleaner future we've been discussing? Arely, we can start with you, please.
Thank you. Well, I think that yes, it's different for developing versus developed countries. In the first case, there is a need to first continue to have or achieve lower levels of poverty and better economic results by having the opportunity to increase the presence of certain industries that may help to achieve the goal of having a solid economy. In the second case of developed economies, they already have an economy that can think maybe never again promote natural gas projects and instead focus 100% in renewables, letting the current or the existing natural gas infrastructure to just achieve its last years of usage and then start its abandonment process. But for developing countries, it continues to be exciting to have opportunities to grow the pipeline grid, for example, or to develop virtual pipelines using LNG or other technologies to actually go or achieve those places that are very far from the main pipeline. Or also to increase or actually have storage infrastructure, again, because natural gas is this key or this tool for having economic development. And their first need, particularly after this pandemic, is to reactivate the economy and reach higher levels of economic development. And well, on your second question about what will be the most exciting projects or technology to help propel a cleaner future, I think that hydrogen and batteries are a good example of that. The speed of how those technologies are being implemented and in the same time improved is amazing. And great news for the world. So hopefully we can soon see Mexico a project that considers these technologies.
I hope so too. Thank you. Ricardo, your thoughts?
So I wanted to basically agree with Areli. One of the things that we do in the company that I represent is basically we're in the middle of both supply and demand. We basically try to move the product from one hand to the other. And I think that in order to make it more, I think the future is in terms of something we call break bulk, basically from ships to terminals to trucks to actually the people. So I think the future is for the oil companies and from companies like us is to actually be sure that we transport the fuel in the most efficient way, so there is no it's environmentally friendly. One of the things that I see in the future as well, not only breaking bulk in terms of LNG or natural gas, it's also, like Areli said, something which is basically hydrogen. Hydrogen comes from steam methane reforming, okay? And there's, as we know, 3 types of hydrogen in the future. One which is called gray, the blue, and the green. I think the future lies on being able to provide all this hydrogen to the market, okay? And I think that natural gas, again, plays a big role on that future of hydrogen.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I got to be mindful of everybody's time here, and primarily because we can be talking about this for weeks. But I do want to give the opportunity to the audience to ask questions and for our experts to answer in their own point of view. And we're getting a lot of them, which are very interesting and very relevant to what we just talked about, primarily at the end of this panel. And whoever wants to jump in first. Jeff Mossner is asking, and I apologize, Jeff, but I'm going to try to regionalize your question a little bit. So to the panelists, what do you foresee as the future for natural gas and oil pipeline infrastructure? Do you see viability for its continued use? Do you foresee viability for conversion to hydrogen, ammonia, or will natural gas and oil pipelines become stranded assets? And please take the mic, whoever wants to jump in first.
Hello, Alvaro. So I believe pipelines are continuing to be built today along with the need of natural gas, and not because of the need of that natural gas regionally, but like Lance said, because of the need for those natural gas to be converted to LNG and the need somewhere else. So I do not believe there's going to be some pipeline stranded at this point in time if that natural gas continues to be used and continues to replace liquids and solids in the future.
I mean, we obviously saw a very controversial situation here in the U.S. with the pipeline to go from Canada down through the Midwest, and by definition, any infrastructure with a large footprint is going to have to reconcile with issues around biodiversity, land acquisition, issues of indigenous peoples and the like. So I think these are always going to be enormously challenging, whether it's a pipeline, whether it's an airport, whether it's a road, even a large manufacturing facility. I think it will be especially complicated for pipelines because of the very significant linear footprints that they have. At the same time, they can have a huge input. The There's a pipeline that was recently, or a series of pipelines that was recently built, connecting Mexico and the Mexican market with the Permian gas coming out of the Permian in Texas. This is worlds of benefit for Mexico, given the need there for gas at actually quite reasonable prices. We've seen gas going from Mozambique down to South Africa, across South Asia. So it's fundamentally a critical part. Will it be stranded? I think by definition, yes. I think most of us see a future where gas will eventually be displaced by new storage technologies. But that is not in the 10 to 15 year horizon that one needs to think about when you're financing a pipeline, right? That's maybe over a 30-year horizon or more. And by that time, indeed, we can see a significant evolution in the availability of things like hydrogen ammonia, whereby those assets can then be repurposed for other types of uses. But the fact is they play a critical role today with the technologies that we have, and gas really is the solution to addressing the energy challenge in the most climate-friendly way.
Agreed. Areli, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes, I think that talking around financing this type of projects and the continuity of pipelines in the future, I'm not an expert on financing and anything, but I think that something that should be considered and that may let us see the presence of pipelines for 15 or 30 or a little bit more years, as Lance said, is that we should consider the reason why a natural gas project should be developed vis-a-vis this horizon of at least 30 additional years in which the natural gas will be present in the energy matrix. And so if we are using this project or this pipeline to bring a source of energy to a place that currently has low or no access to any source of energy, this should be taken into account. And that's why, I see that pipelines will continue to be in the picture of energy infrastructure around the world for the medium and long term.
Agreed. Thank you. I think we have time for one more question, and the rest of the questions were kind of discussed during the panel in terms of developed and developing countries, as well as methane emissions that we're trying to cut here. But there's an additional question, and it's tied specifically to LNG. But if the answers want to be in terms of any other innovative energy resource or transportation method, more than welcome to bring that into the discussion. But the question from Gaspar Dussel is, what is your view on LNG demand in Europe? I would like to add also, I apologize, Gaspar, Asian markets, which are big right now in that sense. Will LNG demand increase due to security of supply issues?
Ricardo, as a trader, do you want to jump in, or do you want one of us to take it first?
No. I think it's very important to talk about some examples. I'm not going to take a long time, but UK is a great example of a country that is leading the effort to a better to reduce the emissions and to a better world. But UK needs the LNG, needs the natural gas, because it actually phased out of coal. So they found themselves this winter at a point where they actually need that LNG, and most likely will need more LNG in the future. So I believe there's more demand coming, yes, from the less use of coal specifically, but also playing some politics. At the end of the day, you need always to have 2 or 3 sources of supply, which could be, in this case, natural gas from a pipe coming from Russia, or LNG coming, in this case, from the US. So I see more demand coming just from the substitution point of view.
Yeah, totally agree.
Lance, you want to complement that, or?
No, I was just saying, I totally agree. I mean, energy security is about securing the supply, but that security also comes from diversifying. And so, you know, we're seeing right now in the headlines issues and challenges, and we do every winter, about the degree of reliance of much of Europe on piped gas from the east. And so having a greater diversity of supply is a critical part of the energy security. And I think that will create a lasting need for LNG as part of that diversity.
Thank you. Arely, I would like to also pick your brain on this, primarily, you know, because Mexico is exploring the possibility of increasing that supply as well, trying to be a strategic country in this sense. What do you think about this question?
I think that, of course, LNG demand will continue to grow because of what Lance was explaining. To increase security, levels of security with regards of energy matters, it requires to have a good diversity of suppliers. So in countries that have no reserves around this type of energy like natural gas, or that have low reserves, or that are dependent to one or two specific countries for delivering natural gas using pipelines. The tool that LNG represent is an opportunity to increase their security levels. So because they can have additional sources of energy, and they can blend these sources of energy to try to get also better prices with regards of the gas that they are acquiring. So I agree with Ricardo and Lance that the LNG demand will increase not only in Europe or Asia, but maybe it should be increasing also for other countries that require to diversify their suppliers.
Thank you. Thank you. And I believe we hit the mark in terms of time. And I really, really hope that the audience got a better glance of the industry and our current situation, and how other companies, private companies, and what other countries are doing to promote a cleaner energy transition. I would personally really want to thank Arely, Lance, Ricardo, for taking a little bit of your busy time to be here with us. It has been great talking to you. We learned so much from you, and you know, as member of the club, I am so happy learning these things from people like you. So thank you again, and Brian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, folks. Thanks for a great discussion. Reminder to our viewers that today's discussion is session 1 of 3 for Cornell Energy Connection. Join us on Friday, November 19th from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time for a discussion on green hydrogen, a key to a decarbonized economy, synergies for pathways. Represented on that panel will be members from Stationary Fuel Cell Collaborative, Bloom Energy, the Energy and Environmental Economics, otherwise known as E3, as well as Shell Hydrogen. On Friday, December 3rd, from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern, we'll be having a discussion on the future of the grid on the path to decarbonization. Members on that discussion will be from First Light Power, Fluence, and Distributed Sun. As always, registration is free and all are welcome. You can sign up at cec2021.splashthat.com. Thank you to our moderator for today's event, Alvaro Pinto. Great job, buddy, for guiding us through a timely discussion on a topic that's central to both current and future energy needs worldwide. Thank you to our panelists for today's discussion, Areli Covarrubias, Ricardo Hernandez, and Lance Chris. Your insights are essential to informing a discussion on a global scale, so thank you so much for your time. And lastly, thank you to our sponsors, Con Edison, Chevron, and Distributed Sun. And thank you to Cornell and to the Center for Sustainable Global Enterprise at Cornell Johnson for facilitating today's discussion. We look forward to seeing you all next time.